We stop emasculating men, we would have fewer problems with them objectifying us. And this is something that is covered in the Queen's Code. Now, I mean that as a general statement because there are some creeps, there are some wackos, there are some just terrible men out there. But we're talking about in healthy relationships and healthy engagements. And this is also true with young men, like little boys. And I think that the more we lean into not trying to make men feel powerless on purpose. And I'm not like, because there are things, men may have their own insecurities, right? And it has nothing to do with you. But we have to be honest. There is something that we are doing in our culture and as women that we are doing to intentionally make men feel powerless. We are intentionally trying to strip them of their power. And a lot of times women will say things like, well, that's impossible because there's a patriarchy. But here's what I mean. You can make a man feel powerless just with your words. Like you can degrade him, you can demean him, you can do this to your husband, you can do this to your boyfriend, you can do this to your brother, your uncle, you can even do this to your sons and little boys that you interact with. So it's so important that we start to learn this because there's this push and pull, and sometimes we don't realize why it's happening, and sometimes we as women think that it has nothing to do with us, but sometimes it actually does. And so this is all generally speaking, like I said, this is talking about like healthy men, and the difference between, well, the connection between emasculating men and then men in turn objectifying women. And sometimes it's very subtle, but I wanted to read this because I think that is interesting, and it kind of goes with the conversation of decentering men. So this is coming from the Queen's Code, and I'm going to start with this question. So the granddaughter asks, Grandmother Claudia, are you implying that giving up emasculating men will prevent them from objectifying me? Bert was curious how Claudia would respond. He knew what he would say. Claudia nodded. For the most part, yes. If you're not using your assets to emasculate, he will naturally appreciate your beauty, sexuality, intellect, humor, needs, etc. If he can keep his power, he will not be overwhelmed by yours. He will not be triggered to objectify you. She added intently, and if he is triggered, the solution is to give him more power, not take it away. Now, a lot of us might hear that and cringe. Like, why would I give a man who's already power hungry more power? Why would I give a man who's already objectifying me more power? And I think it's just listen to what she's saying and try to hear her out from a wholehearted perspective. She says, Karen held up a finger in a wait signal, and Bert watched her furiously scribbling. She's taking notes. It tickled him that Claudia paused while Karen's note-taking was satisfied. When finished, Karen said, you said something disturbing. The solution is to give him more power. What did you mean by that? Why would we want to give a man more power? Pause for a second, because I think that the dialogue in this book, it's very affirming in a way that you realize people can actually have tough conversations without insulting people, without being mean, without being sarcastic. Because oftentimes in this book, Claudia, the elder woman, will say things that seem to be disturbing or off-putting to the younger ladies, and they don't react in anger. They don't react out of bitterness or feeling like they need to hold on to something. They're not being super offended by what she's saying. They ask clarifying questions, and that keeps the conversation going. So instead of her saying something like, why would I give him more power? That's stupid. She said, you said something disturbing. The solution is to give him more power. What did you mean by that? Why would we want to give a man more power? She's asking the same question. She could be outraged inside, but the way that she presented the question allows the conversation to move forward without anybody feeling offended or feeling like they have to defend themselves for the rest of the conversation. So Claudia sighed and patted Bert's shoulder. Because the more power your partner has, the more power you both have, Claudia said, smiling at him. She turned back to Karen, and Bert watched Kimberly, who sat in rapt attention. Now, mind you, what she said makes sense. The more power that you give to the man that you're married to, the less he feels the need to compete with you. And if he doesn't feel the need to compete with you, all of that energy that he would spend trying to compete with you, he can just put it into protecting, providing, shining as he is. And that's not to say that you giving him power is making you weaker. It actually makes you stronger. Like she said, if you just resist the urge to compete with a man, all of the energy that y'all would use competing and combating with one another, you use to prosper. And so, because if you give him enough power to handle you, he will not feel overwhelmed and need to steal yours through objectification. Claudia concluded, because there's no alternative, men and women are going to both be powerful or both be weak. That's just how it works. Kimberly gasped, her eyes wide yet again. Yes, dear, Claudia asked. Kimberly looked from Claudia to Bert shyly. He nodded encouragement, feeling incredibly privileged to witness this conversation. Not merely a witness, he thought. I'm part of it. He's proud because he's a man that's being welcomed into this conversation about how women and men show up, and then he's actually helping the women to understand men better. And nobody's making him feel bad. Nobody's over talking him. Nobody's being demeaning or disrespectful. They're just listening intently to his input. So if I told the truth, Kimberly began, every time I've emasculated a man, though I felt glee in the moment, it reinforced my own feelings of weakness. Since I always did it out of fear or frustrations, that's what got magnified. And I will say, think about the times that you want to strip a man of his power. Why do you feel the need to do that? Oftentimes it's in defense. Oftentimes it's because we feel slighted, or we feel insulted, or we feel like they're doing something to make us feel powerless. So that's how we snatch our power back. So there was an example in this book where one of the men at Kimberly's job, he was like, yes, like he got a really big sale, and he was kind of celebrating in his corner. And one of the women got up and she said, yeah, but you're still behind for the quarterly quota. And then she watched him as he got sad and got back in his cubicle. And then she looked around at the other women, like satisfied that they had poked and deflated him. And so in that interaction, him celebrating, maybe it made her feel like, oh, he shouldn't be celebrating. He's such a macho man. You know, like you can think about it in that regard. So really think about the last time that you did something to make a man feel powerless. In instances, or when you're having a conversation with your boyfriend or your husband and you say something to him that you know is going to hurt him. Why are you saying it? Is most of the time it's because you're trying to take the power back in the conversation. So that's the conversation that we're having, and that's the frame of reference that she's talking about. So Claudia nodded and briefly squeezed Kimberly's hand. Excellent observation. Emasculation leaves you both disempowered, just like objectification from the man's perspective leaves both of you disempowered. It makes the man feel like he's empowered, but he also probably deep down feels like a creep because you had to resort to objectifying this woman to feel more powerful. And now in you doing that, now she feels degraded and disrespected. In the same way, emasculating a man, you had to resort to trying to strip him of his power, demeaning him, breaking him down so that you could feel better. And now he feels terrible. So this signal is clear. Thank you, Karen Kimberly. He gave a slight bow. This is Bert leaving the conversation. It's been a pleasure being part of this discussion. Sweetheart, I'm getting some coffee. Do you care for any? This man loves his wife, like he's always catering to her. They all declined and thanked him. He squeezed Claudia's shoulder and took his leave. Karen studied Kimberly as Bert went inside. Compared to when they began their lessons only 10 days before, Kimberly had less of the tough gal, scared rabbit look about her, the strange combination of offense and defense that many women have. She seemed calmer, happier, and more powerful. In a quiet, not needing to prove it type of way. She was infinitely more attractive and pleasant to be around. So she's implying that these conversations that they've been having about men and learning the things that they've been learning to be less on guard and to be more relaxed as women and to not take everything so offensively, not to wear your heart on your sleeve type things. She's softening in her appearance. She's not physically doing anything to change her appearance, but that demeanor from within is changing her. And this is why I always say that femininity is an inside job before it's outside, because a lot of people will put on the external femininity thing. You put on the external femininity qualities. You do your makeup, you do your skincare, your nails are nice, you put on the nice clothes, but then internally you're so hardened, right? And you're so like offended by everything, and that causes you to have like this bitter delivery or this resentment towards men. And all of the beautiful external things in femininity is canceled out by the hardened interior. So I think that was an interesting observation too. She says, is this what happened when Claudia first came into my life? No wonder Mike couldn't resist me. It must be happening again, if last night is any indication. And so what she's referring to is, what's interesting is when Kimberly met Karen, she was smitten by the way that Karen's husband was so enamored by her, like the way that he looked at her, the way that he engaged with her. And that's what made her want to learn these things. But Karen is now looking at Kimberly in the same way, like, oh my goodness, she looks so feminine and beautiful, and I've never seen her like this. And I wonder if this is what my husband was seeing in me. So it's just a really interesting tale. It's a great read. I would say, you kind of have to put your offense on the back burner to enjoy it. But I did talk about this a little bit more in the last podcast episode, if you're curious. And this is coming from The Queen's Code by Alison Armstrong.